Okay, welcome to the United Pubcast for a very special episode, an episode that we have had planned for a while. And before I get started, I'll just make the announcement straight away that this is a Sancho and Rafael Varane free podcast. We'll do our best not to mention them, unless I do have my phone. I'll be scrolling through Twitter. If there is any breaking news, I'm sure someone in the live comments can tell me to check Fabrizio Romano's Twitter timeline, and I'll have to check if Jadon Sancho has been announced. But as I said, Sancho and Varane free zone. I've got my good friend Lewis. How are you, mate?
I'm good. How are you, Tom? Thanks for the invite, mate.
No, very good. Well, you can tell from the podcast title what this is, a podcast about Brazilian or Manchester United players, obviously from Brazil. And this is a podcast me and Lewis, a good friend of mine, we're going to do a couple of weeks ago, obviously before this sort of second wave of COVID hit. Like any guest we have on, Lewis, I'll have to ask, how are you going with COVID? Obviously, you still play football, so it's really affected the season heavily.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, we had to stop the season and we had 6 games to go. Obviously, the club that I play for, which is Hakoah, we play the NPL here in New South Wales. We play NPL 2. We're fighting for promotion, and we just dropped 5th. It's top 4 goes up, and then the season just stopped. So we just the good thing about lockdown is just that I can go outside, I can train, but other than that, just staying home. Unfortunately, that's our reality right now. I think a lot of people got affected with that, but not much we can do. Just stay home, safe.
Just waiting for the football to start back up. The Euros was good. Obviously, the Copa America in your case, which probably didn't have a great ending with Argentina versus Brazil, but I'm sure we'll touch on that in a little bit. But what we'll do was obviously look back at the Brazilians who have played, obviously 8 Brazilians who have played for Manchester United, and we'll touch on them, their ups and downs, how we perceive them as Man United fans and how you perceive them in Brazil, sort of thing. But also just there, you mentioned you still play football, so I think a good thing would be England and Australia have a similar type of culture, so we'll discuss that sort of move from playing in Brazil to go into a foreign country and the challenges sort of that do pop up for certain footballers, because it is a narrative always thrown out there. When a player comes from Brazil, there is a big change, and we as fans demand so much from them, but we always sort of neglect the actual human side and the actual huge culture change it is from them. But before we start, I just want to talk about Man United and Brazil, because if you're to play like, I don't know what was that TV show called, Family Feud, where they used to give you a topic and you had to name 5 things that spring to mind. I'm sure if you ask 100 people, name 5 things to do with football, 99% of them, 2 of the terms they're going to use is Manchester United and Brazil. Manchester United is the biggest club in the world, or obviously for us it is, and Brazil is the most iconic football nation. Everyone has a story or a memory about Brazil and football. So 2 things absolutely synonymous with football. But I'm just thinking, how Brazil, especially when you were growing up, how was Manchester United perceived in Brazil? Because when we do see a foreign player come over from South America, the 2 clubs they always mention is very much Real Madrid and Barcelona. Not so much Manchester United, where someone from Australia or England, Europe, Man United is always top of the list. So just back to your childhood and even now as well, how is Man United viewed in Brazil, especially compared to those Spanish clubs?
Look, as you said, Real Madrid and Barcelona are the biggest ones. Even if you ask a teenager that is growing up in Brazil right now, maybe now they will mention Man United, they might mention Man City, they might mention Bayern. But back then, early 90s, I would say that Man United, maybe Premier League wasn't as famous in Brazil. Maybe in the 80s when Liverpool played against Flamengo in the World Cup, the Club World Cup, maybe Brazil was knew more about the English clubs. But I would say Man United got famous sort of in South America and in Brazil especially was in 1999 when they won the Champions League, and then they went to play against Palmeiras in Japan in the end of the year. After that, and straight after, they went to Brazil to play the Club World Cup in the summer, in the winter for them.
Well, that was a big controversy in England because Man United had to leave. We had to abandon the FA Cup that season because it was in January, so it was mid-season. So Man United were ready to play the FA Cup, and United were going, or sorry, not United, but England were trying to sort of gain host for the World Cup rights, I think in 2006 or 2010, I forget which one, I think the 06 World Cup. So there was big pressure on Man United from the UK government to go and sort of represent England over in South America. And they had to obviously pull out of the FA Cup that year.
Yeah, it was kind of weird actually that comp, because out of nowhere we had two Brazilian teams in the World Cup, because they said there was the country that was hosting it. They had the two main national winners, but Corinthians, which is the team that I support, won the National League in 98 and 99, in Vasco. But it's meant to be Palmeiras, because Palmeiras won the Libertadores before. But anyway, and then Man United got very famous going there. It's all jokes around as well, because they all say that because Real Madrid went there as well, Real Madrid and Man United, maybe because Real Madrid also won the Champions League a year before in 98. And we're all the Brazilians make jokes around because the Man United players didn't take us serious. Was playing there, so they went there, they were drinking, and then went to the game and played. But I reckon when you go on the field, obviously you're gonna take serious. Obviously you want to win, especially if you know how Ferguson was. He wanted to win everything, and all the players as well. And they played the big players against Vasco. I don't know if you remember. Oh, that goal that Edmundo scored. It was in that Vasco team. We had Romário, Edmundo, Juninho, both Juninhos. Juninho that played for Middlesbrough and Juninho that played for Lyon. So was very big for us Brazilians, especially because the grand final was two Brazilian teams as well. So
I think that you just go back to especially the way United treated it. I remember seeing so many photos, and it goes back to that part, the important part of it being in January, which is obviously freezing conditions in the middle of winter in Manchester. Suddenly these English lads were able to go over in the middle of winter over and sun themselves on the beach in Brazil. So yeah, they'll sit
Rio
down,
especially. Yeah, exactly.
But well, I just seen a comment here from Param, who's been on the podcast a couple of nights ago, saying, "Evening lads, has the crying about Fred started this season?" We will get into Fred, Lewis. I'm really keen to get your opinion, because a mixed bag with Fred. Obviously, we've discussed that a little bit, but Man United fans have a bit of a love-hate, maybe more hate relationship with Fred. Before we get into the players who have played for United, the 8 Brazilians who have done so, I just want to talk about, obviously, you've done the move from Brazil to Australia. If you hear that shaking, it's just my dog. I think he's got an itch or something. But if a lot of players go from Brazil to England, and we talk about the sort of the challenges in culture, whether it be a language thing or the difference in football, it's very, very much a similar thing. So I've moved from Australia to England. I've witnessed the football. It's very similar, the football in England and Australia. Obviously, England's a lot more intense, but the style of football is very similar. Obviously, extremely different to that in Brazil. So I'm just thinking, how did you find it moving from Brazil to Australia? What were the main challenges in regards to football? Was it solely the on-pitch differences, or was it stuff like language? Was it stuff like your pre-match meal is going to be different, etc.?
I think the biggest change, it's the way Englishes or Australians, you guys look at the game. The way we look at the game is completely different. And the game here is much more, it's rougher than back in Brazil. I think players will struggle most, I would say, with the language, obviously, because it's a completely different language. Like if we go to Spain or if you go even to Italy, I think it's similar to our language, to Portuguese. But related to the game, how the pace of the game and how even referees, how they deal with the game as well. Here they let the game goes much more. Which is back in Brazil, the game would stop more often with free kicks, falls, everything. Here they let it go, and you gotta become tough. You gotta become like you have to learn, otherwise you're not gonna play. Because I've seen a lot of South Americans, not only Brazilians here, even though Argentinians, Uruguayans, they're pretty tough from the way they play. But the way they do here, and I imagine in England as well, they let it go so much. So I reckon you gotta adjust your game and just go with it. Otherwise, because the game is not gonna change for you. And I think that's why some Brazilians and South American players, when they go to England, I will give you an example. Like maybe Paulinho went to Tottenham. He couldn't adjust because the game was too fast for him. And just that's the football related. Another thing I think for the Brazilians, for South Americans, for them to actually adjust to the lifestyle as well, other than the language, I would say the weather as well. The weather in England doesn't help as much as well, because you get days like that is weeks raining, weeks very cold. Even the summer is different than our summer. I reckon that could be another reason for them to get used to it.
What do you think of this comment? I'll just throw it back up from my co-host Larry. Is not on tonight, but he's watching. So just get your opinion. Obviously, as I said at the start, we had the Euros, but also the Copa America. And when I was watching the Copa America, you and me discuss football all the time at work. Absolutely, discuss it for days, and you could watch it the highest level, or you could watch under 6 girls football. We just love football so much. But when I was watching the Copa America, it was so frustrating. It was like in each game, it seemed like there was 15 minutes of injury time, because every time there was a foul, someone was rolling around, sort of thing. So Larry said here, South American football is so hard to watch. Perception is they spend more time trying to get a foul rather than try to win the game. So just someone who's obviously played there and a lover of football, how do you view it when you do see?
I reckon comes back to what I said before, as in adjust, because the South American, we used to, like, when it's 2 different places for to play. So the game there, they stop more quickly. So every time that the referee it's a foul or contact on you, they might think it's a free kick. When they go somewhere else, so like for example in England, you guys grow up, the game is contact, is all the time, it's rough. So back in South America, they just playing. They're not trying to dive all the time. But because they used to it since they're a child, even though with the game we watched, Argentina and Brazil, I agree with you guys. We even had a discussion in our group chat on the WhatsApp with the Hakoa boys, my teammates. They were just saying like how tough, how painful it was to watch the game, because they were most of the time on the ground. But I have another idea about that as well, because in the Argentinian team, they knew that the Brazilian team was better technical than them. So their game plan was like give hard on them and then find a goal, or how they find with Di Maria, and then go with it. But I reckon a lot of players struggles in England, especially because the fans are pretty tough on whoever is diving or whoever is pretending to win a foul or something.
It'd be interesting to see if I know one of I forget the name, is it Jared Gillett? I forget, is moving from the A-League, and this season is going to be in the English Premier League. So usually in a domestic league, it's just whatever nationality is, referees from that nation will be the referee. But now the England is starting to maybe expand that a little bit and get foreign referees in. Do you think the game would change then if it would be a huge culture change, but do you think if you threw an English referee in the Copa America, that would stamp out, like the Brazilians would quickly adapt, or do you think it's just so ingrained?
Yeah. I reckon, because in our national league, in a Brazilian league, the way they ref is completely different than the way the Libertadores referees, the way they do. They let the game goes, they let flow more. You know what I mean? In Brazil, they stop the game all the time. So any contact, they fell over, and then that's why they created bad behaviors on the players as well, because everything they're going to complain about, everything they're going to ask for a foul. But I think they tried that before back in the day, trying to
I think a lot of nations sort of do it, but I think it's something that's going to become more and more, especially with the English Premier League doing it now. I'm not sure how the Australian referee is going to go. Give him time, but I'm sure there'll be a controversial decision or two. But we'll quickly move on to why everyone is here, the Man United part of the podcast, and sort of reminiscing about players. Both, as I said, there's a mixed bag with Brazilians. And as I said, the biggest club in world football, obviously from our point of view, and Man United, and the most iconic football nation in Brazil, you would think there's this huge relationship and connection between the two. But as I said, there's only been 8 players, and currently 3 of them are in the current squad, in Pereira, Fred, and Telles. So you'd think there'd be actually a lot more Brazilians who have represented United, but it's not the case. Obviously, that is a good number 8 in terms of a foreign country, but yeah, you'd think it would be a little bit more. So obviously France and Netherlands have quite sort of high numbers at United, but not the Brazilians. But the first story of a Brazilian, I got an interesting one because it was back in, I'd say, 2003, and we always have, Lewis, I don't know if you know, but Man United, we have real iconic images of when a player signs. So at the moment, sorry, I know I said I wouldn't mention this name at the start, but we're all waiting for the Jadon Sancho shirt signing, where he's there holding the shirt up and the scarf. It's a photo you always remember of a player. We remember the Rooney one, we remember Beckham, we remember Rio Ferdinand in his white suit, etc. And one of the ones, a very famous one, is Cristiano Ronaldo. We remember Cristiano Ronaldo there on the pitch holding the scarf next to Sir Alex Ferguson. And as a Brazilian, do you know who the player standing next to Cristiano Ronaldo on that day was?
Yeah, Kleberson.
Unbelievable. Like, he was, at the time, I'll just show Kleberson's name up there. At the time, it was only one Ronaldo for me, Brazilian Ronaldo. When we signed Cristiano Ronaldo, it was, who is this guy? It was exciting. Okay, young player coming in, obviously got tricks and flicks, but I didn't really know who he was. Kleberson was a World Cup winner. I was thinking, this is the player, this is the exciting signing here. Ronaldo, that's good. See what happens. The Kleberson was the one a lot of the hopes were on. So I'm just thinking, and ultimately he might go down as almost the worst Brazilian at United in terms of expectations, and he ultimately sort of so-called flopped. But just your thoughts, as Brazilian growing up, that 2002 World Cup is such a good team, obviously won the World Cup. Kleberson was a part of that team. Your thoughts on Kleberson growing up, him as a player, and ultimately his time at United, from what you can remember of his short time at United?
Yeah, no, it's funny because he was the first Brazilian to ever play for Man United, which is a big thing as well. And I was reading a story a few days ago that Kleberson joined Man United because Ronaldinho told him that was going to sign for Man United.
Yeah. Well, Ronaldinho was very close.
Did you know that?
Yeah,
so
very close.
Because that was a year after the World Cup. That was 2003. So Ronaldinho was about to leave PSG, and he had someone, because he was to get sponsored by Nike, and he had a guy who was he's one of the main guys, like he was going to in the election for Barcelona. And then he mentioned to Kleberson, he said, "Oh, look, I might go to United. That's the best place for you to go." But Kleberson also had offers from Leeds and Newcastle with United, but he didn't want to sign because he was waiting for a big club. And then Kleberson got signed to go with Ronaldinho. And then once he signed, the guy that Ronaldinho had it on his pocket, whatever it was, won the election, which was Laporta, and won the election in Barcelona, and then he went to Barcelona. But it's funny because Ferguson took him to replace Veron.
Yeah, the other South American, yeah.
But it comes back to what I said before. He didn't adjust. He didn't adjust with, like, even when Ronaldo was there, they were together. They were even in the same room. They were like trying, because they were both new in England. They both didn't know the language. They both speak Portuguese. So it was a mix of things. I think he didn't adjust to the game. The game was a bit too fast for him, especially as a midfielder, which is to play in the midfield in England. It's different than playing in Brazil. In the game, there's a big difference pace-wise. You know what I mean? So I think, and then he got some injuries as well. And look, when you go, especially he was in a not a small club, I would say medium club in Brazil, which was Atlético Paranaense. It's from Curitiba. It's south of Brazil, but it's not even top 8 bigger clubs in Brazil. But they won the National League before, and he was one of the main players. That's why he made the World Cup.
Well, from memory, the World Cup, he started in that World Cup midfield, didn't he?
No, who started was Juninho. Juninho played for Middlesbrough.
Yep.
So Juninho, because Brazil was to play with 3 3-5-2 in that team, and they used to play Gilberto Silva and then Juninho. But Juninho played the first 4 games, but Kleberson always went on for him.
Okay,
always.
Yeah, because I remember he's always, but he wasn't just a bench player. He was always in and around the team.
No, he always on. And then against Belgium in the round 16, he went on and played. He changed the game because the game was 0-0 after halftime, which was a very tough game. Everyone says that was the hardest game Brazil had on in 2002. Was round 16 against Belgium. And then he went on, he changed the game. And then since the next game, which was against England, when Ronaldinho scored that goal, he was starting. He started against England, Turkey, and then Germany. In Germany, he was the best player on the field in the grand final. So
I think that's amazing when you say, like, can you imagine a World Cup winner, man of the match in the World Cup final? You'd think unbelievable football, and rightly so. But then he comes to United, and United fans very much treat him as, not in a disrespectful way, but that he was a flop. And ultimately, if you call someone a flop, you're sort of labeling them a bad footballer, which ultimately can't be the case because 6 months earlier, he was the best player in the World Cup final.
But there are a few things that we have to consider as well. When the player goes from Brazil, in Brazil, he's the starter. He will start every game. He will be that guy who will start there. He doesn't have a competition in the squad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when he goes overseas, when he goes to United, for example, which is one of the biggest clubs in the world, imagine he was there. He had to compete with Scholes, who else?
Roy Keane, David Beckham, Nicky Butt, David Beckham.
So yeah. Look how different it is in language, food, weather. So it's a mix of everything. You know what I mean? It's not an excuse, but you got to consider that as well.
Yeah, well, Amadou was on the podcast the other night saying always felt that the South American contingent at United struggled. There hasn't been many, which we'll get into. Probably one of my favourite players in the past 10 years. It's obviously one of the Brazilians, but just moving on to the next Brazilian, and again, one that splits opinion. Some fans hated him, but said he was absolutely rubbish, and others said he was extremely underrated. And I'm definitely in that camp, because I think we'll start with he won the Golden Boy Award in 2008, Anderson, and that was after breaking. Did he break his leg twice or both legs once, etc. And so he's off the bat of a couple of bad injuries. He won the European Golden Boy Award, which you look at the names that have won that. You look at the names now in terms of your Mbappes, your Haalands, etc., the players like that, sort of world-class talents. That is the type of category we had Anderson back in 2008, 2007, 2008. So he came in with a huge pedigree and ultimately was coming. Well, he didn't come from Brazil. He obviously moved to Porto, but still a big change going from Portugal to Manchester. And I think a lot of people forget. They think, he's had a slow start. Sir Alex Ferguson, when Anderson was fit, and we obviously won the double in that first season, in the 07-08 season, and in the Champions League and in big games in that season, Sir Alex Ferguson, almost first name on the team sheet was Anderson. And no matter how Anderson's career turned out at United, obviously ups and downs, especially with his fitness, could never really sort of get that form going. And that was down to his injury record and his fitness. He never really completed 90 minutes. He was very often the first man off after 60 or 70 minutes. But ultimately, in big games, Sir Alex Ferguson trusted him. And you look back at Sir Alex Ferguson's reign at that end, it's that 07, 08, 09 period. It was our most successful ever period. And Anderson was in the midfield then.
He always starting, yeah. A funny thing about Anderson is when he joined United, he was only 19. He's not even 20. So imagine if he came from a very, very poor family in Brazil. So he became a soccer star out of nowhere. When he was 17, he was a Grêmio. He got famous in Brazil because Grêmio is a big club in Brazil, and Grêmio was in the second division there. And Grêmio had to win one game, and they got 4 players with red cards. 4 players. So they played a game with 7 players. And the game, I think, was 1-0 or 2-0. So imagine you playing with 7 players. They had 1 player in attack, and that guy was Anderson. And then in a counter attack after a corner, he dribbles everyone and scored 2-1 with 7 players on the field. So that's how Anderson got famous, and maybe that's why Porto bought him, I'm not sure. But it's another funny thing about Anderson, how uh, United played against Porto in a preseason game, I think 2007 or 2008, 1 year before you guys signed him. And he absolutely killed the game. And Ferguson loved it. But he's never been number 8. He always been a number 10 or center forward when he played 4-4-2. And when he joined to United, I think Paul Scholes got injured, wasn't it? And then
Yeah.
Ferg and then Ferguson started him as a number 8. And then since then
Well, I think the Anderson arrival was down, and I forget, I'm sort of refresh my memory, but it was down to Scholes' fitness, because Paul Scholes the season before had an eye injury, or the 2 seasons before had an eye issue, and it was very sort of touch and go about his career, whether he was going to continue. So that was something Sir Alex Ferguson obviously sort of question was concerned about. So whether he sort of saw Anderson as that attacking midfielder, which Scholes was, or as a box-to-box, which he kind of sort of, that's how he did play at United. He was never that far advanced. But I think the Anderson sign-in, you'd have to ask Sir Alex, of course, but I think it was with a view to potentially sort of replace Paul Scholes. That ultimately didn't happen, but I can think that was what the thinking was. And if a manager like Sir Alex Ferguson is trusting a player like Anderson to replace Paul Scholes, I think that shows how highly Sir Alex Ferguson was rating Anderson.
And that's what I find interesting about Ferguson as well. It's his vision. Because he definitely didn't see Anderson playing that position against when they played against. You know what I mean? So maybe he saw like, oh, that guy could be that guy for Scholes or for this sort of position that I need. Because United always played on this sort of, especially in 2000, was always those 4-4-2, wasn't it? Sort of thing.
In the Champions League, he started to move towards having 3 in the midfield. Which ultimately he did in that 07-08 season, which we then go on to win the Champions League. And Anderson, I think the main reason I have so much respect for him, I have respect for all the players who play for United, as long as they don't go and disrespect us when they leave. But the thing with Anderson, we've had such a discussion the last couple of weeks with the Euros final, where Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford came off the bench and missed a penalty. They were brought on 4 penalties. And all of us here were saying, and rightly so, were saying, it's not fair on a player to come on in the 120th minute, not touch the ball, then have to go and take a pressure penalty. Anderson did the exact same thing in the Champions League final in 08. He came on for Wes Brown in the 120th minute. John Terry missed the penalty. Anderson took the next penalty. Talk about a pressure penalty. He hasn't touched the ball yet. Anderson puts it down. Was he 19 at the time? And smashes it in. And probably not the best penalty. Czech sort of dived out of the way. But they all count. And he scores in a Champions League final for us and a crucial penalty. And that is why I look at Anderson and just have the utmost respect for him. But just go through 1 or 2 comments here. Josh's, I saw Larry's comment here about Anderson, maybe a little bit disrespectful, loved a Big Mac. I think that's what ultimately got him at the end of his career. He did like a little bit of takeaway dinners from all reports from a lot of I remember Patrice Evra always used to make a little bit of fun of him. But we'll quickly move on, and we won't spend too much time on the next player because we always throw this player up in trivia. One of the trivia questions a lot of Man United sort of pages use is say, name all the Brazilians who have played for United. And some of us always say Possebon, but when you then look at his Wikipedia page, half the pages have him as Italian. I think he represented Italy in the under-20s maybe. But he obviously moved from Brazil, and he was highly sought after. Ferguson definitely did rate him. I think he made his debut in that season as well, at the start of the 07-08 season. But ultimately, he unfortunately got I don't know if he broke his leg or it was just a really bad cut, because I remember you could see the bone in his shin, but I don't actually think it was a break. It was a sort of horrific injury, and ultimately he obviously went on to have a career, I assume. I hope so. But it never really kicked on at United. Do you remember anything from Possebon, whether it be sort of talking about in Brazil?
He's not famous at all in Brazil. We obviously heard about him. He actually went to Santos afterwards, after like in 2012, when Neymar was at Santos still. But with everyone was saying, "Oh, Santos is getting a player who played for United." You know what I mean? So it wasn't his resume. But back then, because I think he joined United in 2008, and he wasn't even. I think he played a few games as a professional player. And then out of nowhere, Ferguson found him. And then he went to United. And then it is what it is. He didn't perform, and
Well,
then
I
he
think
went
there's
on
one
loan
thing.
to Braga. Yeah, I think he went to
It
Portugal
rings a bell.
on
Portugal.
loan.
He definitely went to Portugal.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think one of the things, and
So
I'm sure someone in the comments can correct me, because I think it was only a handful, 4 or 5 games he played for United. But I have a feeling, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but he played he was on the bench in the 2009 League Cup final against Tottenham. We beat Tottenham in a penalty shootout. I'm positive Possebon was on the bench, because I remember we rested players like Wayne Rooney and players like that in that League Cup final. We had a big Champions League game the week after, and it showed what Sir Alex Ferguson thought of the League Cup and Tottenham, where he rested players like Wayne Rooney in a final. And I think he rested Van der Sar. Ben Foster was the goalkeeper that week. But moving on to, we'll put these two in one category. We'll put the twins, Rafael and Fabio. Now, a lot of the discussion will play sort of centre around Rafael, who's probably more the prominent twin, and one of my favourite players at United. Absolutely loved him. But just your thoughts on them, because I think they went in over maybe the year or two before they signed for Man United in the old Night Cup. A lot of the Brazilian teams used to enter that at Old Trafford or at Carrington, and they were two players that really stood out and ultimately end up signing for United. They signed a year earlier, but they couldn't join because of some of the rules in terms of signing young players. But just your thoughts on them, because I'll send to most of my discussion with Rafael, but Rafael and Fabio, you combine the two, United fans absolutely loved them. They absolutely adored these two players.
yeah, because it comes to the way they behave themselves as well. They were very professional. They were, since they start, I think they came with the right mentality to the team. To they face the opportunity as if like this is the opportunity of my life, both of them. And you see like even Rafael, who had way more opportunities than Fabio, they both were always very professional, always training very hard, always like there for whatever they need. So sometimes, as I said to you, at this Kleberson situation, players in Brazil, they play every game. They treated as main stars. When they go to a European club, they just want more. They just had to fight every day for their spot. And I think that's what Rafael and Fabio, because they went so early, they didn't play as professional players in Brazil. They adjust to their mentality, you know what I mean? To their English mentality, the European mentality. And then that's why they become like so popular, maybe. Because it's funny story as well. Like two twins, they both fullbacks. Fabio, they also right footer. He didn't want to play as a right back to not compete against his brother. You know what I mean? So like it's a funny story.
Well, you mentioned I could talk for a day about Rafael. Absolutely love the guy. I remember in the 12-13 kit, the checkered kid-eyed Rafael on the back of my shirt, where he scored not in that shirt, but he scored at Anfield. He's killed one in the top corner that season. He also scored a goal of the season away at QPR that's our last title win. That seems a lifetime ago. But just on Fabio there, you mentioned sort of wasn't given, or it was all I perceived he wasn't given the chances, Rafael, and I would agree. But then another trivia question a lot of United fans can sort of always throw out there. In the 2011 Champions League final, obviously we don't want to remember that because Barcelona were just on a different level that day.
He started.
Fabio started that day. So again, someone like, you can imagine some of the players Sir Alex could have thrown in there, but he trusted Fabio. And obviously you definitely would have trusted Rafael, but Fabio to be thrown in there is a big sign of confidence.
But think about now when Rafael joined the first team, because when they joined United, obviously they didn't go to the first team straight away. They went to under 20s, maybe under 23s. I'm not sure. And then Rafael was the first one to be called up. And the competition for Rafael was Gary Neville. Gary Neville was 33, 32 back then. So he was finishing his career. He's towards the end of his career. Obviously, he wasn't going to play 50, 60 games a season. So that's why Rafael got the opportunities earlier. Fabio had to compete against Evra. How are you going to compete against Evra? Which is very consistent left back, a top left back. And then if you see how many years was Evra as in the first team, how many years? How many years he was?
2005 to 2000. A lot longer, 2005 to 13.
So maybe that explains a lot why Rafael had more chances than Fabio. even though Fabio, he was a left back, right-footed, but he started in the Champions League as a right back because maybe Rafael was injured.
Rafael pretty much, and true, as you say, Gary Neville's age, but Rafael ultimately did displace Gary Neville, and sort of Gary Neville had to retire because of it. Not because Gary Neville sort of had his own issues, but ultimately Rafael did do enough to ultimately win that spot. And just on, before we go into the current crops to finish off the podcast, a little bit go back to Brazil and on the notion of fullbacks and ultimately Gary Neville. Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville, obviously Sky Sports, the sort of United fans have a sort of love-hate relationship with the way they talk, but they're always good value. But Jamie Carragher made the quote probably last year, maybe 2 years ago, saying no one grows up wanting to be Gary Neville. Like no one grows up wanting to be a fullback. Everyone wants to be the striker or the winger. And I just want to throw it back to you in terms of growing up in Brazil. Like if we mention Brazil, we know number 10 position or the 7, sort of a wide attacking player or your striker. But if you do look at Brazil, they've always had the best fullbacks in the world. Like just off the top of my head, you got Cafu, Roberto Carlos, Carlos Alberto, Marcelo, Dani Alves. They've always had the best fullbacks. And I'm just thinking, go back to that quote from Jamie Carragher, saying no one grows up wanting to be Gary Neville, aka a fullback. In Brazil, is there sort of a pathway? Is there an idea in some kids' head, well, no, I do want to be a fullback. I see a career as a fullback. Or is everyone a number 10 or a winger and ultimately not good enough and they go back to a fullback?
Exactly. The thing is, the game is all the Brazilian players back in the day, and now it's different because they develop the players differently right now. But because it's our main sport, they're all very technical. They're all very good with the ball. So they all like if you say, like I was reading the resume about Rafael, he started as a striker when he was 11 years old. And then when he went to Fluminense, with the competition, with the other players maybe better technically than him, he went to right back because it was the position that they needed someone there. So that's what happens with all the fullbacks in Brazil. So they all maybe when in their youth stage, they all center midfielders, strikers, wingers. Cafu was a right wing when he started. Cafu had to do. It's an interesting story about Cafu. He had to do 14 trials to get in. 14 to get in the club. And then after that, he's the only player in the world to play 3 World Cups grand final in a row. 94, 98, 2002. Yeah. He's the Brazilian player with more games with the national team. So you see, like, and he always been a right wing. And then he became as a right back. Roberto Carlos was a left back in Brazil, but when he went to Europe, to Inter Milan, with Roy Hodgson always played him as a left wing. And that's why he had to go to Madrid, because he said to Roy Hodgson, I can't play as a left wing. I have to play as a left back because that's where I'm going to play my national team. And then they exchanged Zamorano with him. Zamorano went to Inter, he went to Madrid. But that's the mentality Roy Hodgson thought. Like, he's very offensive. He can't play as a left back. Yeah. That's what it is with the fullbacks in Brazil.
No, yeah, it's interesting. But we'll move on. And obviously the current crop now, because as I said, there's only been 8 players for Brazil who have represented Man United, but 3 of them are currently here. And we will start on one who I wouldn't even say divides opinion amongst Man United fans at the moment. It's very much get him out the door as soon as possible. But is a player I have liked over the years, but ultimately his time is up. And I'm a good friend of the podcast, probably, Andreas Pereira. Just your thoughts, because, again, he's that one, I don't know if he's born in Brazil or in Belgium, but he grew up in Belgium. United got him from there. And
no, he was born in Belgium.
Oh, born in Belgium,
he was born in Belgium, but his dad is Brazilian. Okay. His family is Brazilian. His daddy was a former player as well.
Look, Josh knows he's throwing this comment up saying get the popcorn out, and he knows exactly what's coming. Because Andreas Pereira, I say this all the time, Andreas Pereira isn't good enough for Man United. There's players with far less ability than him who are far more suited to be successful at United. Because if you just look as a footballer of Andreas Pereira, he's fantastic. He's got all the ability. He's technical. He's got a great touch. He can finish. He can pass. but ultimately it doesn't come together for him. When he's put under pressure, it just doesn't work for him. I'm just thinking, do you think it's a case of him being in England, that what we mentioned at the start of the podcast in terms of he just can't adapt and he should go? Because obviously he went on loan in Spain for 2 years and did very well at Granada, and was it Getafe or Valencia? Valencia was it, and Granada. And did very well. But ultimately in England, you can see all the ability. He's got all the technique, but it just hasn't worked for him. And ultimately he's come back from loan from Lazio, but pretty much unanimous. Every single United fan say, get out. It's time to go. Your time's up.
Yeah, but now he's being called. He wanted to stay at Lazio, didn't he?
Well, it's still a very strong possibility that he goes back. Whether it's another loan or a sale, who knows? But yeah, I think his time definitely is up at United.
You know, some players, they don't adjust to the English style, like Premier League style. If you see, but then you're a lot of people will say, but every league, the game is fast. That's the football these days. But in Premier League, it's different. It's a different pace. It's a different dynamic of the game. But I think that the problem with Andreas, he went too early into England. I think he should have stayed.
He was part of the United Academy for a while. He was there from, I think he was 14. He signed for United, I think.
Yeah, but
he went in the academy. He didn't make his debut for a while, but he was there as a young kid.
Maybe it's. I reckon it's the way he plays. You know, his game adjusts to to Italy, to Spain. Why he doesn't adjust in England?
Well, Perem, sorry to interrupt you, but Perem just put a comment up here saying the faith I had him to get a starting spot under Jose was very misplaced, because when Jose Mourinho came in, he played Andreas Pereira in the number 6 role in pre-season. And pre-season, okay, Andreas looked very good. And he showed all his ability on the ball, and you think, okay, he's a future number 6 for us. And ultimately, it didn't sort of come to fruition, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I think his time is up now. The next player, maybe in the same category, his time definitely isn't up. He's definitely going to be a part of the United squad this season, but someone who definitely does divide opinion. I'm sure the comments people will throw their opinions in now. But as I said, another good friend of the podcast, and Fred. Before we get into his time at United, and I don't want to bring up the Copa America, and obviously, unfortunately for Brazil, they lost the final. But he was very good for in the Copa America from what I saw from Brazil. He was starting pretty much every game.
He started pretty much every game. I think only the 4th game he didn't start against, which was like just a game that we were qualified as in first place. But he definitely was part of the first team this Copa America. Look, in Brazil has people in Brazil. They have a lot of problems with coaches that bring players from Europe to play for Brazil. Obviously, the best players are in Europe, but because a lot of players playing in Brazil, they don't get as many opportunities as Fred, as the players in Europe. That is the bigger problem for them. You know what I mean? So they rather someone who plays for Flamengo, Corinthians. They're always gonna find someone that is better than the players who plays in Europe. And Fred is one of one of them, because we had a player. He just joined Marseille now. His name is Gerson. He was playing. He's exactly the same position as Fred. He's left footer as well, and he was playing for Flamengo. And he was doing very well for Flamengo. And everyone, the media, the supporters, everyone was saying he should be called up for the first team. But he was called up for the Olympic team because he's under 23. And then Tite, our coach, started Fred instead of we had all other options. That guy who plays for Aston Villa, what's his name? Douglas Luiz, the players, because he always Fabinho plays over Casemiro, and you know what I mean. So, but Fred, he had a okay competition for Copa America, but on and off, he plays well one game, and then the next game, like for example, you watched the grand final. He had a terrible game that game. Unfortunately, he didn't play well. And I think I watch
What
a
do you
lot
think
of.
of this comment in terms of what do you think of this comment about throw up on the screen from George? Like we discuss football pretty much all day at work when we used to work together, and some great footballers, you see their ability, but you think something's missing, just their intelligence. They're not they don't have a football brain. And George has just said here the dumbest first team football at United by far. Because I do look at when Fred gets the ball, and like in the mold of Andreas Pereira, you watch him strike a ball and you think he's a hell of a player. He's got the technique. He should be fantastic. But sometimes you see him go and collect the ball off the back four. Like he goes and gets the ball off the centre back and he just lacks complete awareness of what's around him. And he'll just turn and get crunched by the opposition midfielder. And then we lose the ball on an 18-yard box and ultimately lose the game. So just your thoughts on, you see Fred, there's potential there, but in his head, it's just something's missing.
You know, he's another player. He was a number 10 when he started. And then in Europe, I think even at Shakhtar, before he joined in United, he was playing towards the attack.
Well, he's got that ability. He's got that ability.
Yeah, but I don't know if he has the ability to be 8 or 6. I think that's the main problem. You know what I mean?
Well,
because
I say that ability technique-wise like he has. However, us watching him at United for 2 years, he cannot shoot to save his life. I've never seen someone so less dangerous in front of goal. Like if the ball falls to Fred on the 18-yard box, you're thinking goal kick. There's no chance he's going to put this in. Even his goal this year against Tottenham, he's inside the 6-yard box and he almost put it over the crossbar. But we'll quickly move on as we're running out of time. But won't spend too much time on the last play. Obviously, again, current player, Alex Telles. Just your thoughts on him in regards to the Brazil setup. Is he someone that is in and around close to being in the team, or it's a case of he needs to be playing first-team football? Because when he came to United, a lot of it, I was in the category saying he should maybe displace Luke Shaw. Now, ultimately, Luke Shaw went on to have a great season, and when Telles came in, Telles was good, but ultimately just couldn't displace Luke Shaw because Luke Shaw was great. So Telles' sort of appearances were quite limited. Do you think that's ultimately what cost him a spot in the Copa America team?
Yeah, no, 100%. But I think I was thinking that today. Telles, I think all the English fans, they should go to Telles, go on Instagram and say thanks to him. Because of him, they got a very good left back in Euros. Because Luke Shaw just switched on and then become a great left back. The competition for left backs in Brazil is between Telles, between Alexandro, between the kid plays for Atletico, Renan Lord, Marcelo. Maybe it depends. He's towards the end of his career, but he's still Marcelo. He has the chance to make the team. I think the big problem with him was that Luke Shaw switched on, and then he didn't have much game time. But I still think because now Luke Shaw he's not going to start the season with United because he's injured, is he?
The reports coming out that he played part of the Euros with broken ribs. How accurate that is, I'm not sure, but I saw, no pun intended, but I did see the strapping they showed a photo of.
But I think this season will be a big season for Telles because he's good. He's a quality player. I really like him, even though he's the typical Brazilian fullback who likes to attack more than defend. But he's very good on the ball. And look, if he double up with Sancho on the left side, they will do overlaps. He's going to be very good. Yeah, you guys have very good options this season. Now we're getting,
as I said,
when as well.
When we previewed the preseason a couple of weeks ago, I made the point that everyone's excited to see young players throughout preseason. But in my opinion, the name to look for was Alex Telles this preseason in terms of one of the senior players who's fit, because obviously a lot of the players are at the Euros, or Fred and Cavani were at the Copa America. And with Luke Shaw potentially missing the start of the season, I think Telles he'll go into that season, the first game of the season against Leeds, as our starting left back. And ultimately, if he has 5-6 games where he performs at a high level, Luke Shaw will then have to be the one who has to displace Telles. And I think that's a good option to have. A lot of people prefer Luke Shaw, some prefer Telles. Ultimately, Luke Shaw was the best left back in Europe, in my opinion, last season. Yeah. But it's a good problem to have. And as you say, I think when you look back at the whole signing of Telles as an individual, you think, oh, he hasn't quite done it at United. However, from a club's point of view, and if you put yourself in Solskjaer's shoes, it's been a fantastic signing because what it has enabled Luke Shaw to go on and do. But
Exactly.
yeah, about 50 minutes has gone there. That has absolutely flown by. I said 8 Brazilians. Luckily, there wasn't 28 Brazilians. I would have to do a 24-hour podcast. But hopefully everyone really enjoyed that, something different. And as I said, try to really stay away from the Rafael Varane and Jadon Sancho news. I'm sure Larry and I will maybe do a video tomorrow. Surely Jadon Sancho should be announced by this time tomorrow, and we can go live with that and hopefully something a little bit more concrete on Rafael Varane. But thank you for everyone putting your comments up and interacting with the live chat. Make sure you please do like the video and subscribe. So whenever all our videos will be live, this podcast will obviously go on our podcast app as well, so you can listen audio only version at your convenience. But make sure you are subscribed, so whenever we go live, you can join in the chat. And as I said, beats lockdown, whatever's on TV. I don't know what's on TV at the moment. My wife's always flicking through the channels and she can't sort of focus on one thing. So other than that, Lewis, as I said, Lewis, a football coach here, player and coach. Where can they find your Instagram, Lewis? I'll put it in the description, but just let everyone know.
Yeah. My Instagram is Luis Lobo FC, Luis Lobo Football Coaching. I share everything about football, everything related to games, to players, to coaches. Obviously, my sessions, especially to help kids. A lot of kids follow me, the players that I coach, and just.
Well, a lot of our listeners, Lewis, do. We have the Man United Supporters Club here in Sydney. We have these charity games. Now, ultimately, during COVID, we're not sort of getting them out as frequently. But we have maybe 2 or 3 games a season. And I can assure you, obviously, Lewis is based in Sydney. Especially Larry, could you go over to Lewis's page and sign up for some 1v1 sessions? Because you could do really work on your touch. And Lewis, someone I've seen play and someone I've seen coach, does have a fantastic touch. And ultimately, when you do see players sort of develop in Australia and the way our system has worked over the past 20 years, we do need more people like Lewis who understand the game in a different way, and let's say a better way, is the way they do in Brazil. And very good. So a lot of our players can go over to him and sort of sharpen their tools ahead of our next game, because I'm organising our next game at the moment, and it's likely against Leeds. So we do need to be sharp. So Larry and a few other boys get over there and give Lewis a run.
Yep.
And ultimately, we'll post all these. We'll post all the links in the description below. Hopefully, you enjoyed this podcast, and we will chat to you, or Larry and I will chat to you again tomorrow. Hopefully, with Jadon Sancho news. So, cheers, Lewis.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks a lot for the invite. I really enjoyed it. Good luck for Man United this year. I reckon this year you guys can get something out of it. Some good. You guys.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Hey, we need it. Trust me, we need it.
You need more than Europa League or.
Yeah. Now we're in the Champions League.
Champions League, maybe. I'll support you.
If Chelsea win it, we can win it.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers,
Chat
Tom.
to you tomorrow.